Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EMDR Maven podcast. I'm Julie Miller. I'm licensed in Arizona as a professional counselor and an independent addiction counselor. I'm an EMDRIA-approved basic and advanced EMDR trainer, an EMDR Institute regional trainer, and an EMDRIA-approved consultant and certified EMDR therapist. I provide basic and advanced training through the EMDR Development Center, and you can learn more about that at the website emdrdevelopment.com. This is season 2 of the EMDR Maven podcast, and we're going to discuss the use of EMDR therapy in the treatment of addiction, both substance and process addictions. I often present on the use of EMDR with addiction, so you can develop competence with this population as you listen to the podcast, attend trainings, do some of your own research and reading, and also I have additional trainings on the EMDR development website that will help. Please send me your question. I'd be happy to discuss any of the answers to those questions on the podcast. We'll also have some other EMDR consultants who specialize in this area as guests. On the website, I have free resources and free trainings that you also might find helpful. I host an EMDR no-fee study group on the last Wednesday of each month online, except for December, from 12 noon to 12:50 p.m. Arizona time. This group is for anyone who's completed the EMDR basic training. The study group is for anyone who has questions and would like to learn more about the use of EMDR. Send me an email and I'll be glad to send you the link. Again, you can contact me at jmiller4721@gmail.com. That's JMILLER4721@gmail.com. In this episode, episode 2, we're going to explore some causes of addiction and how we can conceptualize addiction from the adaptive information processing model. The adaptive information processing model posits that the client's dysfunction, the why of them coming to treatment, is rooted in dysfunctionally stored memories of trauma or adversity, meaning they were not fully processed and they're stuck. The National Institute of Drug Abuse, or NIDA, says that unresolved trauma and adverse experiences are present for up to 92% of those who are experiencing addiction. So I think that we can say that those two things pretty much go together. Also, according to NIDA, they list several causes for addiction. It's not as simple as just one thing that causes someone to be susceptible to addiction. This information is available on the National Institute for Health website. It's nida.nih.gov/publications/drug facts/understanding drug use addiction. So they talk about components of addiction. There's biological components, genetics, that may account for about half of a person's risk for addiction. We do know that addiction tends to run in families. Even if it's process addictions, they may not be the exact same substances or behaviors that runs in families, but certainly there are propensities that run in families. But that only accounts for about half of a person's risk for addiction. There are societal pressures, peer pressures, early exposure to drug use, to stress, and parental guidance that can really greatly affect a person's likelihood of drug use and addiction. So there's a certain amount of what our society teaches and does and how our family dynamics work together with these biological risks for addiction, but there's also developmental issues that take place. There's genetic and environmental factors that interact with these critical developmental stages in a person's life. And that's where you start getting the adverse childhood experiences, those 10 categories that an individual may have experienced if their parents were ill or imprisoned or using drugs or alcohol themselves. If their emotional and physical needs were met, if there was abuse, if there was shaming, there was neglect. There's a whole series of questions that we can ask clients based on that adverse childhood experiences study. And that raises the risk for every experience someone's had before age 18. Obviously, that raises the risk that they're going to develop some of these kinds of dysfunctional behaviors that really impact on a person's quality of life. Often people talk about addiction of whatever kind as an effort to self-medicate. And that might be mental health issues like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, relationship dysfunction, could be beliefs about the self that cause pain. I'm not good enough. It could be I'm not safe or I'm too vulnerable. So there's ways in which addictive behaviors and use of substances can help the individual medicate what's uncomfortable or just trying to function in life. Now, in 2007, the US Congress passed an act recognizing addiction as a disease. It actually started in the 1950s. The American Medical Association had already designated alcoholism as a disease in 1956. In 1987, the American Medical Association and other medical organizations officially said addiction is a disease. The shift away from addiction as an indication of weak character or moral failing has been going on for a long time, and it's definitely a step up to think of it as a disease. There's some trouble with that particular definition of addiction as a disease, and we're going to talk about that. There's one particular addiction-focused protocol that talks about addiction being a disorder of memory, and that's the Cravex protocol by Michael Hasse, which is available freely online and in many books that have been published where you can learn more about the Cravex protocol. We will be talking about it in later episodes this season. But it basically says that addiction is a memory. We have an experience of some kind, or it was not completely properly processed as an experience, and now it's been stored dysfunctionally, meaning it's undigested, and it gets triggered. So the addiction memory gets triggered, and that's what leads to cravings and urges to drink or use or act out in some way. So the original name of this particular protocol is the addiction memory protocol. So the idea with this is that it's those memories that are not properly processed of using or relapse that get triggered, and that's what creates the craving and future using. So that's one possible understanding of addiction, and I think it has its place. Some of what we've talked about also is an indication of an avoidance of negative experiences, which very much fits along with the detour protocol by A.J. Popke. Detour stands for desensitization of triggers and urge reprocessing, and it's very much about trying to stay away from negative experiences, trying to be in control of any negative feelings that I have, any negative reminders that I have in my environment. And that's what sort of pushes the addictive behavior based on this particular perspective. There's also the feeling state addiction protocol that is based on the idea that we chase positive experiences. So we're chasing these positive feeling states of belonging, of feeling in control of our lives, of feeling connected to others, feeling successful like a winner, feeling like I'm winning at life, or that I'm attractive, or that I'm desirable. And that's what pushes addictive behavior. So none of these addiction protocols really are based in addiction as a disease. Jung talked about Carl Jung, if any of you remember Jungian psychology. Carl Jung stated that chemical substances work at a deep level of psychic functioning. blurring the boundaries in the inner world. So the fragmented worlds of the addict become merged inside. And once someone has experienced this sense of wholeness, they may well want to experience it again and again, especially since it's going to have a very short half-life, because it's not an actual sense of wholeness. It's temporary, so it will fade, and then we have to go find it again. That very much fits with some of what the feeling state addiction protocol discusses. There's this idea that it is a chronic, lifelong condition. It involves compulsive seeking and taking of a substance or performing a particular activity or behavior despite the negative and harmful consequences. The only argument I have with that is that the phrase chronic, lifelong condition. There are individuals that I know that have dealt with their addiction issues, dealt with trauma issues, and it doesn't necessarily continue lifelong. Although, if you look at the DSM, it only differentiates between two phases of remission in substance use. You could meet the criteria in the DSM for a substance use disorder, say to alcohol, and you have a year of sobriety, you are still going to meet criteria for that diagnosis, but you're going to now be in sustained remission. It's sort of like we label someone who has a substance use disorder with that disorder, and now it is lifelong, it is chronic. Just because you're not using for a year doesn't mean that you no longer meet the criteria, which I think is, there's a bias there that really needs to be examined a little bit more closely by those who come up with these ideas that end up in the DSM. Early remission in the DSM indicates that within 1 year, the person hasn't had any symptoms of using for at least 3 months. Sustained remission means that within a year, you haven't had any symptoms for 12 months, but you're still going to meet criteria for the disorder, even though it was more than 12 months ago that you had those experiences. So the shift in terminology, now we don't have substance abuse, we don't have substance dependence, we have substance use disorder. It's an improvement, and there's a sort of pejorative feel to substance abuse or substance dependence as opposed to substance use disorder, but it's still not where we need to be. We need to see this as not necessarily a permanent condition on the part of someone who has been using or acting out in a way that was helping them cope, helping them find something they felt they were missing, or, for whatever reason this individual might be using or acting out. It doesn't mean it's a lifelong sentence. The brain is plastic and not diseased, meaning it can learn, it can unlearn. The brain is plastic in that it can learn and change and function differently, and different parts of the brain can take over for other parts of the brain that are not able to function as well because of some kind of physical issue or damage in the brain in some way. So the brain is not diseased, it's plastic. Addiction is a learned behavior, and it serves a function for the individual. Addiction can be unraveled and disentangled from a person's life. It is not a lifelong sentence, despite the fact that the DSM will label you in a substance use disorder for the rest of your life. Even if you have been in full sustained remission for years, you'll still meet that criteria for a substance use disorder. If you did at any time in your life, you still meet that criteria. Johann Hari is a fairly controversial figure in American popular culture, but he did a favor, I think, for people in the mental health field. He has a TED Talk called "Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong." He says that the opposite of addiction is connection. You can find this video on YouTube, and if you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to look at it. I think it's brilliant. He argues that addiction is often a result of a lack of meaningful connection. His book, called Chasing the Scream, explores these ideas and makes a case for addiction being rooted in the unmet need for connection and purpose in attachment trauma. The idea that people weren't there for whatever reason, that's a trauma for the individual, and that's why we see so much trauma in the lives of folks who come to treatment to deal with addictions. There's a way in which an individual who uses or acts out is making an effort to attach. If there is an attachment deficit, a history of not having a secure or stable attachment as a youngster, this factor interacts with all the other genetic, environmental factors, the societal factors that increases the risk for dysfunctional behaviors like addiction. So EMDR therapy can be an important part of someone's treatment for resolving the addiction issues, for moving beyond addiction. EMDR therapy is part of the comprehensive solution. It is not the comprehensive treatment in and of itself. It is part of it, in that there is a great many reasons someone might be struggling with addiction. They're interconnected. They have something to do with memories, with experiences, with the societal influences, with genetic influences, trauma being a very big part of why someone has an addiction or compulsivities. I'd really like to hear your thoughts about the causes of addiction, the interplay between these different components that we find if you scratch the surface of someone with an addiction or a compulsivity. You'll find very similar kinds of things underneath. Those adverse childhood experiences, attachment trauma, genetics, societal influence. So send me your comments, send me your questions. Let's talk about this more. In our next episode, we're going to discuss research on the use of EMDR with addiction. You can send your questions and comments to my email address, which is jmiller4721@gmail.com, or you can visit my website, emdrdevelopment.com, for more information. Also remember, the No Fee Study Group is available on the last Wednesday of every month except December from 12 p.m. to 12:50 p.m. Arizona time. Come and visit us there. Just send me an email asking for the link, and I'm happy to provide that for you. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll keep talking. Bye for now.